friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Jump for Joy and Cheery Christmas, and I'll also be using the Echo Park Celebrate Autumn 6x6 pattern paper pad. I've stamped my images out on some Copic friendly cardstock with Memento Tuxedo black ink, since I'll be coloring with my Copic markers today. And I'm starting with these two adorable squirrels. Squirrels are one of my absolute favorite animals. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know this. I just adore them, and especially the red squirrels that we had when I used to live in Germany. So I'm coloring mine with kind of a reddish brown color palette here. So I'm using E15, E17, and E19. I started with my E19 as my darkest along the back side of their bodies and the underside of their tails, and then blended forward with the E17 and then the E15. And then I left a little space on his face and belly to bring in a lighter shade. I'm going to skip over a couple of numbers down to the E11 because I want it to be quite a bit of difference there so that he has that nice soft little muzzle and belly. And for my second squirrel, I'm going to color him exactly the same, just in the reverse for the shading. I'm imagining that my light source is between them or right overhead, so I'm just shading them in the direction that they're facing. So the highlight will be on their faces and the shadows on the back of their bodies. So once again, I started with the E19 and then used the E17 for my mid-tone, the E15 for my lightest shade on the bulk of their bodies, and then came in with that E11 for their belly and muzzle. And then I'll also use the E11 to just color in that little acorn. The next image that I'm going to tackle is this large pile of leaves, and this is a great opportunity to bring in a lot of different fall colors. So I'm going to start with a red combo. This is actually my favorite red combo. It's R29, R39, and R59. So I'm just going to select several leaves from this pile. I want to make sure that none of them are touching each other, just to keep the color kind of spread out over, the image. So I'm starting with that R59 and laying in my shadows. I'm trying to add some on the underside of the leaves and also anywhere where another leaf is kind of overlapping it. And then I'll bring in the R39 for my mid-tone, blending out the edge of that R59 and just softening it up. And then I'm going to finish with the R29, which is that bright fire engine red that just is so lovely. Now with most shades, I usually only go over the very edge of the previous color, but with this red combo, it's a little bit different. I do tend to color over almost all of the image, if not all of the image, with that R29, just because I think it really brightens up those darker reds. And those darker reds add such a richness and a depth to that color because they're almost like a brown red, especially the R59. Next, I'm going to bring in some oranges. I'm using YR04, YR14, and YR18. And again, these have just a little bit of a brown tone to them, so they're going to really look like those fall leaves. So I started with the YR18 as my shadows, and then blended out with the YR14. For some of the leaves that are really kind of being overlapped by others, I just used those two shades, and then this one on the top I also added in the YR04. For my yellows, I'm going for more of a golden tone, so that's why I'm using the YR21 and the YR23. Again, this combination has some brown undertone, so I'm kind of sticking with that theme because that's usually, the leaves that have fallen down to the ground usually are turning a bit brown, so it just adds that really rich fall color. The last combination that I'm using is YG61, YG63, and YG67. And again, this is a kind of a muted green. It has almost an olive tone to it, just a little hint of it. So it's going to match really well with the rest of our leaves, but just add a pop of brightness to it. So I use the YG67 for my shadowed areas, and I'm blending with the YG63 towards the centers, and then just leaving a little bit of area on the tips for a highlight with that YG61. And then I'll just trim these out with the matching dies. For my focal panel, I've used the Lawn Fawn Stitch Circle Stackables, and then I've also used the Stitch Hillside Borders for the green panel. So I'm going to adhere that down on top of the blue with some Tombow Mono Multi Glue. Then I'm going to bring in my images and begin to adhere those down as well. I'm going to use the leaf pile first, since that's kind of the main image there, the largest image for sure. And then I'm going to take one of the little squirrels and add that to the top of the leaf pile so that it looks like he's poking out, which I think is super fun. Then I'm going to take the second squirrel and add him to the bottom of the leaf pile, kind of looking up at his friend. The two tree branches were stamped with Lawn Fawn walnut ink, and I'm actually going to stand those up on their ends so that they look like trees. I tucked the smaller one in behind the squirrel on the left, and then the larger one is going to get tucked on the edge of the leaf pile on the right. I'm going to add the acorn into the little paw of the squirrel in the leaf pile. I always like to kind of tell a story with my images, and I'm imagining that the acorn was lost in the leaf pile and he's kind of jumping up and saying, "I got it!" So I also added a little cloud and an extra leaf to one of the tree branches, and now I'm going to adhere this whole focal panel to a scalloped circle stackable from Lawn Fawn. And I die cut that out of some pattern paper that looked like burlap, so it has that great texture to it. And now I'm going to trim off the right side with the Stitch Rectangle Stackables. I've popped my focal panel into my MISTI, and now I'm going to use Lawn Fawn Jalapeno ink to stamp my sentiment down at the bottom of the grass portion. And I'm using the sentiment that says, "So Thankful," from the Jump for Joy stamp set. I'm going to stamp that down twice to get a really good impression. And then while I have my MISTI out, I'm also going to stamp on the inside of my card. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Merman ink to stamp out the rest of the sentiment, which says, "For Your Kindness," as well as a couple of falling leaves and the little bird from Cherry Christmas. I used the Lawn Fawn Stitch Rectangle Stackables again to cut my larger pattern paper, and I'm going to adhere that down to cover the entire front of the card base. And this is a standard A2 size card, so it measures 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall, since it is in the portrait orientation. And then I'm going to take this red plaid and adhere that down at the bottom. I've got this little blue tone-on-tone print that has a little bit of a floral sprig on it, and I'm going to adhere that right above the plaid so it just breaks up those two combinations. And it also ties in really well with the color of the card base that I chose. I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'm going to peel off those release papers, and then I'm going to add that to my card. I'm going to center that flush on the right hand side. I wanted my focal panel to hang off just a little bit, which is why I die cut that earlier with the same die as I use for my pattern papers. To add a little bit of sparkle and shine, I'm going to take some platinum stickles and add just a little bit here and there to all of my leaves. Now this is going to hide the color of them a little bit, so I just want to use it as an accent. I don't want to get too heavy-handed with it. I started out just doing the red leaves, but then I ended up deciding to do all of them. So I'm adding it mostly to the area that is shaded with my darkest Copic, and that way it'll just be a little bit consistent across the board. And to amp up that glimmer even more, I'm going to take some Pretty Pink Posh rose gold metallic crystals, and I'm going to adhere those down starting in the top left corner, going across the card down to the bottom right. And this is a great pack because it has all different sizes. I'm using my pick-me-up tool to grab those. It has a little bit of putty in the tip, and then the end comes out and just allows you to be able to set those back down into the glue. And the glue that I'm using is the Ranger Multimedia Matte. I find this works the best for going through the mail. When you're sending a handmade card to someone special, you really want to make sure that none of this stuff falls off. So that is going to complete our card for today. I'll lift that up to the light. You can see how those crystals have such a pretty gold and magenta flash to them. And there's another peek at the inside. If you enjoyed today's video, you can show your support by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel if you haven't done that already. I would really love to have you. You can also go ahead and ring that notification bell if you want to make sure that my videos always show up in your feed. If you want to keep on watching, here's 2 extra videos that I thought you might also be interested in. So hopefully those will tide you over until my next one. Until then, I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.